There's something fascinating about human nature, about the way we value things not when they are present, but when they are gone. It's ironic, isn't it? When something or someone is always available, we assume they always will be. But when that presence is taken away, time does something remarkable. It doesn't erase feelings, it magnifies them. And that's exactly what happens when you step back from a man who has taken you for granted. At first, he may not notice. That's the hardest part, isn't it? You think, if I pull away, will he even care? But that's where most people misunderstand the psychology of distance. When you remove yourself from someone's life, the impact isn't immediate. In fact, it starts as almost nothing. He goes about his day. He's occupied, maybe even a little relieved to have space. But then something small happens. He reaches for his phone and there's no message from you. He scrolls through social media and you aren't engaging with him. He hears a song, sees a place, smells a familiar perfume, and suddenly there's an emptiness where you used to be. The first few days are easy for him. He's conditioned to believe you'll always be there, like a constant background presence in his life. He might assume you'll check in, or that he has all the time in the world to reconnect. But with each passing day, as you remain silent, the absence starts to feel heavier. Time is no longer working in his favor, it's working against him. Because here's what happens. Our brains have a way of amplifying what we can no longer have. When you were there, he could see all of you, the good, the challenging, the moments of frustration or impatience. But the longer you're gone, the more his mind starts filtering out those imperfections. And the more he understands that these are the things that matter, because these are the things that allow him to be well. These are the things that make his mind function at its highest level. His memory doesn't replay the arguments or the misunderstandings. It replays the best parts. The way you laughed at his jokes, the way you looked at him when he spoke about his dreams, the way you made him feel like the most interesting person in the world. And that's the shift. That's when he starts to feel the weight of your absence in a way he didn't anticipate. He might not even understand it at first. He just knows something feels off. His usual distractions aren't working like they used to. The conversations with other people feel a little more surface level. The nights out with friends aren't as exciting as they should be. And then one day he wakes up and realizes, I miss her. But here's the most important part. This process only works if you let time do its job. Most people make the mistake of pulling away only to check back in too soon. They let their own impatience ruin the very effect they were trying to create. Because for this to work, he needs to sit with the discomfort. He needs to fully feel what it's like to be without you, not just for a moment, but long enough that he begins to crave your presence in a way that feels undeniable. And that's the power of absence. It forces him to confront a truth he might have ignored when he had constant access to you, that losing you is not a neutral event. It changes things. It alters his mood, his thoughts, his perception of the relationship. Because deep down, we all have an ego. And when someone who once adored us suddenly stops reaching out, we start to wonder, did I lose them? Were they more valuable than I realized? It's at this point that the dynamic shifts. No longer are you the one waiting, hoping for his attention. Now he's the one watching, wondering if you've moved on, if you're thinking about him at all. The longer he goes without you, the more his curiosity turns into longing. And longing, that's what creates the desire to act. So the question is, can you be patient enough to let this process unfold? Can you resist the temptation to check in, to remind him of your presence, to make it easier for him? Because the truth is, the more you do nothing, the more he feels everything. Time is the greatest ally you have. It's working on your behalf, amplifying your value with every silent moment. The biggest mistake you can make is to assume that if he hasn't reached out, he doesn't care. That's not how human nature works. He may not even fully understand why he's feeling restless, why he's suddenly reminiscing about you, why no one else quite measures up. But that's the beauty of time. It breaks through even the most stubborn of minds, forcing them to see what was always there. So if you want him to feel your absence, truly feel it, you must be willing to embrace the silence. The longer you stay away, the more he will come to terms with what he lost. And by the time he realizes it, you'll no longer be waiting. That's when you win. There's a fascinating aspect of human nature that few people recognize when they're caught in the emotional pull of a relationship, especially when they feel someone slipping away. It's this: people don't just miss what's gone, they miss what they can no longer control. Think about that for a second. It's not just the absence of something that creates longing, it's the realization that what once felt like a guarantee is no longer within reach, that what was once familiar is now unpredictable. And for someone who's been taking you for granted, that is an incredibly unsettling experience. Because here's the truth: as long as someone knows they have access to you, they don't need to think about you, they don't need to analyze their feelings, they don't need to wonder what life looks like without you. But when you step away, when you truly remove yourself from their orbit, something shifts. The dynamic changes. Suddenly there's a gap where your presence used to be. And the mind hates gaps. See, when a relationship dynamic is unbalanced, when one person is always the one initiating, giving, making the effort, it creates a certain rhythm, a predictability. And predictability doesn't create desire, it creates expectation. But the moment you interrupt that rhythm, you force a mental recalibration. He goes from expecting you to be there to questioning whether you still will be. And that question, that's where real emotions surface. That's where he starts to feel, not just think. Because there's a difference between knowing something is there and feeling the loss of it. Intellectually, he may have always known you were valuable. He may have even cared deeply. But if he never had to question your presence, if he never had to experience what it was like without you, then he never had to truly appreciate you. And that's why time is such a powerful tool. It doesn't just create absence, it creates contrast. And contrast is what makes someone see what was previously invisible to them. At first, he may not even register the shift. Maybe he assumes you're just busy, or that you're playing hard to get. But as time goes on, something deeper starts to settle in. He starts to wonder, has she moved on? Did I miscalculate? What if she's happier without me? And that's where the emotional discomfort kicks in, because now he's not just noticing your absence, he's feeling the uncertainty of no longer knowing where he stands with you. And for someone who has been used to your presence, that uncertainty is uncomfortable. Now, here's the key. This only works if you are genuinely willing to let go. If you're still secretly waiting, checking your phone, analyzing his social media, hoping for a reaction, then you're not truly stepping back. You're just pressing pause. And people feel that energy. They know when they still have you, even in your silence. But when you shift your focus away from what he's thinking and onto how you're living, when you start investing in yourself, expanding your world, becoming a person who is fully engaged in her own life, that's when the real transformation happens. Because suddenly, you're no longer the one waiting, you're no longer the one chasing, you're no longer caught in the exhausting cycle of trying to make someone value you. Instead, you're operating from a place of self-worth. And that, more than any game, more than any strategy, is what actually makes someone crave you. Not because you're trying to make them miss you, but because you're demonstrating that you don't need them in order to feel whole. And here's the irony. The moment you stop needing someone to see your value is usually the moment they do. Because now you're no longer predictable. You're no longer the person they can count on to always be there no matter how they treat you. Now you're the one they have to figure out how to get back. And that shift in dynamic, that's what creates attraction, not just attachment. But by the time he realizes what he had, the real question isn't, does he miss me? It's, do I even want him anymore? And that's the power of truly stepping back. It's not about manipulation. It's about self-respect. It's about showing not just him, but yourself, that your time, your energy, your love are valuable. And that anyone who wants access to them needs to be willing to meet you at your level. So the real challenge isn't will he miss you? Because if you do this right, he absolutely will. The real challenge is, when he does, will you still be there waiting? Or will you have already outgrown him? There's an undeniable truth about human nature. People only truly value what they believe they could lose. It's not a cynical observation, it's psychology. When something feels abundant, when it's always available, it fades into the background. But the moment it's scarce, the moment it's no longer a guarantee, guarantee it becomes important. Now think about this in the context of relationships. If you've always been the one to initiate, to reach out, to check in, to make sure everything is okay, you may feel like you're showing love, and you are. But what you're also doing, without realizing it, is eliminating the very conditions that make someone crave your presence. Because here's the paradox. When someone never has to miss you, they never get to experience what life feels like without you. And when they don't feel that absence, they don't get the opportunity to choose you from a place of genuine desire. Instead, they just expect you. Expectation is the enemy of appreciation. Think about the last time you misplaced something important. Your phone, your keys, a piece of jewelry you wear every day. The second you realized it was missing, you didn't just want it, you needed it. But before it was gone, you probably didn't even think about it. That's not because you didn't care, it's because you assumed it would always be there. Now apply that to relationships. If someone is used to having access to you, if they know that no matter what they do, you'll still be available, still be waiting, still be checking in, they will assume your presence. They may even take you for granted, not because they're bad or unkind, but because they've never had to confront the reality of losing you. And that's where time becomes your greatest ally. When you step back, not as a strategy, not as a manipulation, but as a genuine act of self-respect, you force a shift in perception. The longer you're absent, the more the dynamic changes. What was once predictable is now uncertain. What was once taken for granted is now questioned. And in that questioning, emotions start to surface. At first, they may not note it. Maybe they assume you're just busy. Maybe they think you'll eventually reach out like you always do. But then a moment will come, a moment where they expect to hear from you and they don't, where they look at their phone waiting for your name to appear and it doesn't. And that is when reality starts to set in, because now for the first time in a long time they have to ask themselves, where is she? Why hasn't she reached out? Has she moved on? And those questions create something incredibly powerful: uncertainty. Uncertainty is what keeps people up at night. It's what makes them replay old conversations, scroll through social media, wonder if they made the right choices. It's what makes them realize, often too late, that what they had wasn't just nice, it was valuable. But here's the key. This only works if you're truly willing to let go. If you're stepping back while secretly hoping for a reaction, while still watching their every move, you're not really letting go, you're just waiting. And waiting isn't powerful. What's powerful is shifting your focus entirely. Because the truth is, if someone only values you when they feel they're losing you, they never truly valued you to begin with. They valued comfort. They valued security. They valued the version of you that was always available. But the version of you who prioritizes herself, who invests in her own growth, her own happiness, her own energy, that version isn't waiting. That version isn't trying to prove her worth. That version knows her worth. And that's the version that is irresistible. So, if you're wondering whether time will break him, whether the longer he goes without you, the more it will hurt, know this: it will. But by the time he realizes what he lost, the question won't be, does he miss me? It will be, do I even want him anymore? Because while he was busy figuring that out, you weren't waiting. You were moving forward. There's a moment in every relationship, or almost relationship, where the power dynamic shifts. Maybe things started off strong, filled with excitement, with effort, with presence, but then slowly, subtly, you started giving more than you were receiving. You started adjusting, accommodating, prioritizing someone who over time seemed to prioritize you less. And in that moment, you had a choice: keep giving, keep proving, keep chasing, or step back and see what happens when you don't. Most people don't step back, not because they don't want to, but because they're afraid. Afraid that if they stop showing interest, the other person will simply move on. Afraid that their absence won't be noticed, that their silence will be met with more silence. And so they keep showing up, even when the effort isn't reciprocated. They send the text, they check in, they initiate the plans, they find excuses to stay present in someone's life, even when that presence isn't being appreciated. But here's the truth: you cannot be missed if you never go away. Think about that. If someone never has to feel your absence, they never get the opportunity to realize what it means to not have you. And when a person never has to experience life without you, they don't get to make the most important choice of all, whether or not they truly want you in it. That's why stepping back isn't about playing games. It's not about pretending you don't care when you do. It's about creating space. Space for them to make a decision, space for them to feel what they haven't had to feel before, uncertainty. Because uncertainty breeds desire. What makes people crave something, it's not having constant access to it. It's not knowing when they'll get it again. It's not being sure if they'll get it at all. That's why people get addicted to the thrill of a chase, why people become obsessed with what feels just out of reach. And right now, if you've been doing all the work, if you've been the one making sure the connection stays alive, there is no chase. There is no uncertainty. There's just you, always being there, always being available, always making things easy. But when you step back, the script flips. Suddenly, you're not predictable anymore. Suddenly, you're not a given. And that shift forces the other person to confront something they never had to before. What if I'm losing her? And that thought, that fear is what makes someone realize just how much they actually care. Because here's the reality. If someone values you, they will feel the weight of your absence. They will notice when you stop reaching out. They will wonder why you're no longer as available. And that wondering will turn into reflection. Did I take her for granted? Did I assume she'd always be there? But if someone doesn't value you, if your absence is met with indifference, that's your answer. That's the clarity you've been avoiding. And as much as that truth might sting, it's also your greatest gift because it frees you from investing in something that was never truly investing in you. And that's the part most people struggle with, because deep down, there's a hope that if you keep showing up, keep giving more, keep being patient, eventually they'll realize, eventually they'll change. But people don't change because you gave more. They change because they feel something. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can feel isn't love, it's loss. Because love can be taken for granted. Love can be assumed. But loss is undeniable. Loss creates urgency. Loss makes someone confront emotions they've been avoiding. So if you want to know where someone truly stands, don't keep pushing for their attention. Take yours away. Don't remind them of your worth. Let them experience what life feels like without it. And in that silence, in that space, you'll get your answer. Not through words, not through promises, but through action. Because the people who genuinely want you in their life will always show up. And the ones who don't, they were never meant to be there in the first place. There's a point in every dynamic, whether it's a budding relationship, a complicated situationship, or even a long-term commitment, where someone realizes they can no longer take you for granted. But that realization doesn't come from a heartfelt conversation or a grand declaration. It comes from time, from absence, from experiencing firsthand what life feels like without you in it. And that's the part most people struggle with. Because when we care about someone, when we want them to see our worth, our instinct is to remind them, to stay present, to prove our value, to ensure they don't forget about us. But here's the paradox. The more you try to be remembered, the less they have to remember you. Think about it. If you're always checking in, always available, always finding ways to stay relevant in their life, they never have to feel what it's like when you're not there. They never have to ask themselves, do I miss her? Do I want her back? Because you never really left. You just made yourself slightly less accessible. But real impact, real longing doesn't come from slight adjustments. It comes from contrast. It comes from the sharp, undeniable difference between what life felt like with you versus what it feels like without you. And that contrast, that's what time creates. Time makes people question. Time makes people reflect. Time forces them to confront what they may have been avoiding all along. The fact that you weren't just someone, you were someone significant. Because here's the truth. People don't always realize what matters to them in the moment. Sometimes comfort breeds complacency. Familiarity makes things feel ordinary. And when something or someone feels guaranteed, it's easy to assume they'll always be there. That's why time is such a powerful teacher. It doesn't just show someone what they had, it forces them to feel what they've lost. And the more time passes, the more that absence either solidifies one of two truths. They were never truly invested in you, and your absence doesn't affect them in a meaningful way. They can't shake the feeling that something is missing, and that something is you. Either way, time gives you clarity, and clarity is what most people try to avoid, because deep down, there's a fear that if you truly step back, if you really go silent, you'll be met with silence in return, that you'll learn a truth you don't want to face, that they don't care as much as you thought they did. But here's the thing, that truth already exists. Your actions don't create it, they only reveal it. And wouldn't you rather know? Wouldn't you rather stop living in the limbo of maybe they'll come around, maybe they just need time, maybe if I hold on a little longer, they'll finally see what's in front of them? Or would you rather step back and let time do what it always does, bring the truth to the surface? Because here's what time does best. It filters out the people who were never meant for you, and it strengthens the ones who were. The ones who truly value you, they won't let too much time pass before they reach out. They won't risk losing you. They won't sit in silence and hope you make the first move. And the ones who don't, they will fade, not because you weren't enough, but because they were never truly capable of giving you what you deserved in the first place. And that's not a loss. That's a gift, because the goal isn't to be wanted by everyone, it's to be cherished by the right one. So let time work for you. Let time separate the temporary from the lasting. Let time show you who was real, who was ready, and who was never meant to hold your heart in the first place. Because the longer someone goes without you, the more it will hurt if you truly mattered. And if you didn't, then you've just been freed from wasting another second on the wrong person. Time always reveals the truth. Your job is to be strong enough to accept it when it comes. There's a fundamental truth about human nature that most people overlook when they feel someone slipping away. We are wired to take for granted what feels abundant and to crave what feels scarce. It's not intentional, it's not malicious, it's just how we operate. When something is readily available, when we know we can have it at any moment, it doesn't create urgency, it doesn't trigger deep reflection, it just sits there like an open invitation that can be accepted at any time. This is why stepping back is so powerful, because when you remove yourself from the equation, something interesting happens. You don't just create space, you create contrast, and contrast is what makes people see what was previously invisible to them. Think about it. When you were consistently available, he never had to wonder about you. He never had to question what life felt like without your energy, your presence, your effort. But now that you've stepped back, that automatic certainty is gone. There's a gap where you used to be. And the longer that gap remains unfilled, the more his mind starts working against him. At first, it's subtle. Maybe he notices that he doesn't get his usual morning text from you, or that you're no longer the first person to react to his stories. It's not a big deal yet. He might even tell himself that he prefers the space, that it's nice not to feel any pressure. But the thing about space is that it doesn't stay neutral. It starts as a quiet, almost unnoticeable change, but as time passes, it becomes something else, discomfort. And that discomfort, that's the feeling of realization creeping in. Because what's really happening beneath the surface is a recalibration of value. When someone is always there, their value doesn't necessarily decrease, but their perceived value does. Not because they aren't amazing, but because their presence is no longer a question. And when something is no longer a question, it stops feeling like a privilege and starts feeling like a given. But take that presence away, now suddenly the brain kicks into gear. It starts analyzing, searching for an explanation, looking for patterns. He begins to wonder, has she moved on? Why is she reaching out? Is she happier without me? And those questions are where the shift begins. Because let's be honest, most people are not actually afraid of losing someone. What they are afraid of is losing their place in that person's life. They fear being replaced. They fear realizing too late that they cared more than they admitted to themselves. They fear being the one left behind. That's the real reason space works. It forces a confrontation with emotions that were easy to ignore when everything felt secure. It makes someone feel deeply what they didn't take time to appreciate before. But, and this is the most important part, this only works if you are genuinely willing to let